It's Tracy Durant, Executive Director in the Office of Equity here in Baltimore City Public Schools.
All of our students having access to whatever they need to become the best students they can be.
Identifying what that means to each individual and making sure that everyone has that appropriate playing field.
Equal opportunity for all children, classrooms, and teacher assistants.
The equity policy is a policy that was created specifically to be able to give city schools permission to acknowledge the ways in which we have systems and structures in place that are causing inequities for students that we serve. And so the equity policy is our attempt to name those things, to acknowledge them, and to say out loud that it's a direct contradiction of our stated values and beliefs about what we believe is possible for all students in city schools. And one of the first charges I was given was to help the district get an equity policy drafted and approved by the school board. At this time, considering the persistence of race as a predictor of success or lack thereof, this is a call to action around the adoption of this policy. Thank you.
There was authentic engagement around parents and community members.
We're trying to fix or solve a systemic problem, but we're doing so in a meaningful way to make sure that we do get the outcomes that we're really striving for and to make sure that we don't consistently leave folks behind.
We spent a considerable amount of time this summer meeting with stakeholders, working on the implementation plan. And so as we enter year one, we are engaged in professional development opportunities. And so the training is really focused on the historical context of race in this country, race in Baltimore City, how it has impacted city schools, and then who we are individually in our person and in our role as part of the system. The work of equity is not something you do, it is something you are. So the work is personal first, and so as part of the training, people are spending time with really reckoning what they have learned about race, what they have learned about race in this country, and how in many ways we need to do some unlearning and we need to be educated and we need to really work together to build the kind of culture and community that will really be about honoring the humanity, not just of our students, communities, and families, but also of our teachers and our leaders and our staff.
Before the training, I would say equity was everybody getting a fair slice of the pie, right? So you get 1/4, you get 1/4, you get 1/4. Like that probably was what I would say before. But now I think equity is more about everyone getting what they deserve in order to be at the same place, right? So you might need a little more fuel in your tank because of where you started in order to have the same equal platform of someone else that started out on a full tank.
The systems and structures are in many ways yielding the outcomes that the systems and structures were designed to yield. And so the only way to interrupt that is to be able to name it and to be able to seek ways that we will be better. A good example of a principal leading into this idea of interrupting or perpetuating is Principal Davis at Thomas Jefferson in an incident she was experiencing.
Every year we have Picture Day, but the posters that they gave us to hang up in the building were not children of color. And I'm used to seeing large posters without children of color on it, and I think that's just the way it is sometimes, or that's how I used to think. And so this time I said, I'm gonna email them to ask them, can we get large posters with the same kids on it, on the large posters. And so I did. And I got an email back. I was like, oh, they wrote me back. And then I opened the email and said, unfortunately, we do not.
Part of the beauty in the example with Principal Davis is that it shows you just what it takes to interrupt. It doesn't happen with one email.
It's my job here to disrupt what's happening here. It's not okay. And so I sent another email, except this time I stated exactly what I wanted. So after that, her supervisor got in touch with me and called me directly. And she was very disturbed when she saw the thread of emails. She said, we completely have posters with diverse posters with children of all colors. That should have never happened. And so she came out, she brought us new posters and mailed us new posters, and we had, children of color on our new posters, and we were able to hang it up with pride. And for us, the conversations that we had here, and I think because we got the right posters, even my staff that was involved with this, they felt if we make the right moves, fight the good fight, then we could possibly win.
It is about what you know you need to do for your students, and it is about modeling for your staff and your team. When I ask you to put yourself out on the front line, it's because I'm willing to do the same thing. If we had every single principal do something every single day that was about interrupting, there is no telling what could be possible. Really excited to be able to talk about Lisa Ann. She's a third-year teacher at Halliburton Academy, and I had the pleasure of having her work with me this summer through the Lee Fellowship Program. Lisa Ann recognized that probably about midway through her fellowship experience that the best gift she could give her students was to show up authentically, because then it gave them permission to do the very same thing.
And I think for the majority of my students, I'm the first Asian person they've been in deep relationship with. I am thinking about my own racial identity, that I'm giving space for my students to think about their racial identity and really prioritizing those conversations, knowing that is what will move the needle with achievement rather than the other way around. So I think that naturally facilitates us just being able to share experiences.
It is challenging when you've lived all of your life thinking that my race doesn't matter, my culture doesn't matter, who I show up as every day doesn't matter. And then when you learn that the opposite is actually true, it is important for students to see people that are different for them. So it's important for our Asian American students to see an Asian American teacher, but it's also important for every student we serve to see the diversity.
I think this year I'm a lot more willing to lean into hard conversations or settle conflicts between students that maybe have to deal with interracial tension. I just see that as necessary to being able to do the work, and necessary for students to be able to feel safe and whole in the classroom.
I think that there is a natural power dynamic that exists between teachers and students, and part of this is how do we create the conditions where we get to share the responsibility?
I think as a first and second year teacher, I was often very afraid to let my students run the classroom, and it was very teacher-led a lot of the times. But I think now I'm more leaning into just having students lead and letting them have the power in my classroom and embracing that. Me being able to be stretched in my own learning and my own understanding of what it means to be a teacher, but I think ultimately it leads to a lot better student experience.
And so the idea of doing stuff with students, helping them be full participants in their learning, that would also help us to shift the power dynamic. And the people who are best situated to tell us what they need are telling us what they need. And if it is true that we believe that all city school students should lead and thrive, then our data points, all of those data points, should absolutely tell that story.
Whatever it takes for our students to become the people that they were created to be.
To make sure that that systematic change occurs in a way where students do feel empowered and they can make a difference. But it all starts with looking at ourselves first and not jumping right in and trying to figure out, well, how can we stop this system? Because if we don't think we're a part of the system, then ultimately we may have missed the boat.
And then also do the very critical work that is about disrupting and interrupting systems and structures that cause inequities.